The movie begins by introducing Case, a woman with tattoos all over her body who struggles with drug addiction and is a former member of a cult. Despite her troubled past, Case is striving to turn her life around. However, she finds it challenging due to the haunting memories of her childhood trauma when she was abducted by members of the cult. On the other hand, there's Bob, a sincere police officer who is also a caring father to his daughter Gabby, who lives with Bob's ex-wife, who remarried after their divorce 5 years ago. Unfortunately, Gabby's home life is full of problems due to frequent arguments between her mother and stepfather, which deeply frustrates her. Nonetheless, Bob is always there to support Gabby whenever she needs him. One day, Bob visits his ex-wife's house and calls Gabby to wish her a Merry Christmas. Shortly after their conversation, Gabby senses something amiss as the house suddenly falls silent. Despite earlier arguments between her mother and stepfather, after that Gabby is ambushed by a group of cult members. They not only attack Gabby, but also assault her mother and subject her stepfather to torture. After satisfying their cruelty, the cult members brutally murder them both. The following day, Bob appears angry because his daughter didn't attend the Christmas church service. Concerned, Bob decides to visit Gabby's house along with Arthur, his former father-in-law. Upon arrival, they are horrified to discover Gabby's stepfather's body in a gruesome state, suggesting a potential haunting. They also find Gabby's mother's body floating in the swimming pool. Arthur becomes distraught, as the woman was his only daughter. Shortly after, both bodies are eventually buried, leaving Bob filled with regret for not being there for his ex-wife when she needed him. Additionally, Bob is still unable to locate Gabby. 6 weeks later, Case is crying in a drug rehab center after reading about Gabby's abduction in the newspaper. Case recalls her own traumatic experience of being abducted by a cult group in the past. Determined to help, Case decides to reach out to Bob and assist him in investigating the case. At the same time, Bob is feeling desperate as he continues to search for his daughter. However, he sees a glimmer of hope in seeking clues from Case, who shares a similar past of being abducted as a child. Unfortunately, Bob's superior, John, prohibits him from engaging with Case due to her drug addiction. However, Bob persists and visits Case at the rehab center. He shows her a photo of Gabby's stepfather's body with a tarot card placed on it. According to Case, the card signifies judgment, indicating that Gabby's stepfather had made a mistake against the cult. As they talk, Case becomes overwhelmed by her trauma and abruptly leaves the room in panic. While trying to calm herself, Case recalls her past decision to break free from the cult. During that time, Case endured severe torture at the hands of the cult leader, Cyrus. Fortunately, the torture was stopped by Freeman, a cult member with a striped face and a prosthetic arm. Despite being the leader, Cyrus dared not challenge Freeman, ultimately allowing Case to leave the cult. After recovering, Case meets with Bob to disclose that Gabby's kidnapper is a member of an obscure group called the Left-Handed Path, known for worshipping demons and abducting young girls for membership or even sacrificial purposes. Surprisingly, this group has never been investigated by the FBI and the police. Willing to assist Bob, especially due to her lingering resentment towards Cyrus, Case proposes that Bob disguise himself as a cult member. Soon after, Bob bids farewell to Arthur, assuring him of Gabby's rescue. Despite Arthur's concerns for Bob's safety as his former father-in-law, Bob remains resolute in his decision to thoroughly investigate the case. During their journey, Case recounts her past when Cyrus forced her into prostitution, serving men with distinctive striped noses, marking one of her most traumatic experiences. Eventually, they reach Freeman's residence, where Case requests the authorities' intervention. Freeman, though still part of the sect, has always treated Case kindly. Here, Freeman tattoos Bob's body as a condition for joining Cyrus's sect. After the tattooing, Bob and Case inquire about Cyrus's whereabouts from Freeman, who readily discloses his location outside the city. Based on this information, they both continue with their mission. On the other hand, John is getting drunk with his wife Maureen, initially discussing Bob, who dares to search for his daughter without the help of other police officers. As night progresses, their conversation takes a dark turn when John accuses Maureen of having an affair with Gabby's stepfather. Fueled by anger, John becomes violent towards Morin. At the same time, Bob asks Case about Cyrus's background. She then reveals that Cyrus was involved in gangs and drug abuse from a young age, along with other crimes like violence and human trafficking. But one day, Cyrus killed someone he deeply cared about, which stressed him out and led him to establish the cult. As a righteous person, Bob struggles to comprehend why someone would resort to cultism amidst numerous religions. After a lengthy journey, they decide to stop at a motel. Bob then seizes the opportunity to delve into Case's motivations for leaving the cult. She recounts her longing for her long-lost mother, often mistaking unrelated women as her own. This deep-rooted desire led her to break free from the cult in search of her mother's whereabouts. That evening, they venture into a satanic bar where the youths are partying. Case then meets Errol, a member loyal to Cyrus who owns the bar. Displaying an injection mark on her arm, she assures Bob that it's just a ruse to deceive the cult. Despite Bob's disappointment and suspicion, Case maintains her commitment to their mission. Case then informs Bob of the news she received from Errol that Cyrus will come to the place. On the other hand, Morin arrives at Arthur's bar in a beaten-up condition, revealing that John nearly killed her over their affair. She doubts John's willingness to pursue justice for Arthur's daughter and son-in-law's murders. At the same time, Bob seeks refuge at the bar but encounters Cyrus's henchmen instead. Acting swiftly, Bob signals Case to follow secretly. Shortly after, they spot Errol with Cyrus's men, who inform him of Case's return, shocking one henchman named Gutter, prompting him to alert Cyrus. As they begin to move, Case decides to confront them alone, but she is forced to meet Cyrus. Meanwhile, Bob loses sight of Case until eventually locates her, only to be ambushed by a cult member. Suffering severe injuries, Bob buys medical supplies to tend to his wounds. On the other hand, Cyrus brutally assaults Case, feeling betrayed since her departure from the cult. He suspects Errol of plotting against him by bringing Case back. To prove his theory, Cyrus orders Case to kill Errol, who instead threatens to do the unthinkable. At the same time, Bob is tirelessly searching for Case. After hours of searching, he spots an elderly man wearing Case's jacket, forcing him to reveal where he found it. This leads Bob to a nightclub where he witnesses Case being assaulted by thugs. Without hesitation, Bob intervenes, using a shotgun to eliminate the attackers. Exhausted from the ordeal, they retreat to their lodging, where they mutually support each other, both suffering because of Cyrus's cult. The following day, they resume their journey to pursue Cyrus, who has evaded them and no longer considers Case a concern. During their journey, their bond strengthens, evident in Bob's more caring towards Case compared to their initial encounter. After days of driving, they encounter Errol once more. Despite their inquiries about Cyrus's whereabouts, Errol refuses to speak until Case loses her temper and attacks him. Fortunately, Bob intervenes, urging her to restraint, reminding her that harming Errol would eliminate their only lead. Unfortunately, Errol manages to flee before they can extract any information. The following day, Case invites Bob to visit a building, which turns out to be the ritual site of Cyrus's cult. Seeing the place triggers memories of her past trauma when she was tortured and nearly sacrificed by Cyrus. While exploring a room, she is suddenly attacked by one of Cyrus's guards, whom she manages to overpower. She then reveals to Bob that Cyrus kidnaps girls, subjects them to drugs, prostitution, and murder, with some possibly still alive like Gabby, serving corrupt officials. Hearing this, Bob becomes extremely angry and immediately sets fire to the place. That night, Cyrus witnesses the fire and is informed by Errol that Case caused it to lure him. However, Cyrus suspects that Errol intentionally revealed this location, especially since there are many hidden drugs inside that can be sold at a high price. He orders his men to inject a snake with drugs to make it more aggressive and deadly. Cyrus intends to kill Bob and Case with the snake, but before executing his plan, Cyrus performs a snake dance to punk music. He then instructs his men to place the snake in Bob's car while Bob and Case dine at a cafe. During the meal, Case shows Bob a bullet, saying that the bullet is God. Essentially, the bullet always determines the fate of humans, whether they live or die. So as long as they have bullets, they still have a chance for revenge. After dinner, Bob returns to his car, but as he's about to light a cigarette, Cyrus's snake suddenly bites his hand and neck. Thankfully, Bob manages to kill the snake, but one of Cyrus's henchmen witnesses the incident. Bob immediately pursues the henchman, stabbing him, but the snake venom starts taking effect, causing Bob to cry out in pain. Before treating Bob, Case decides to eliminate Cyrus's henchmen so they won't be exposed. She then takes Bob to Freeman's place for treatment, as only Freeman can help him. Freeman then injects an antidote to Bob and instructs Case to watch over him until he wakes up. The next morning, Case wakes up beside Bob, relieved to find him conscious and no longer in pain. The antidote proved effective, saving Bob's life when it was hanging by a thread. As Bob's condition improves, they resume their journey together. This time they encounter Lena, a former close friend of Case's, intending to lure Cyrus out of hiding. On the other hand, Arthur confronts John, accusing him of orchestrating the deaths of his daughter and son-in-law and the kidnapping of Gabby, based on information from Cyrus. John denies the accusations, claiming Cyrus is manipulating Arthur against him. Meanwhile, Morin looks confused as she's unfamiliar with Cyrus. Eventually, Arthur recounts his history with John and Cyrus to Morin. It turns out Cyrus once agreed to sell his mother's land to Arthur and John for an entertainment venue. However, when Cyrus's mother refused to sign the sale agreement, he grew furious and fatally shot his own mother. He then used her hand to sign the document. Since then, Cyrus has become increasingly insane, led him to form a cult and a criminal gang. John and Arthur felt powerless as Cyrus would accuse them of being involved in the murder if they acted against him. After hearing this revelation, Morin becomes enraged and decides to take revenge on John. At the same time, Bob and Case contact Cyrus using Lena's phone. Cyrus then offers a deal that essentially states if Bob wants to save Gabby, they both have to retrieve the money stolen by a roll. Hearing this, Lena becomes unreasonably angry, so Bob kicks her out of the inn. Later that night, Case strikes a deal with one of Cyrus's henchmen responsible for guarding the girls, unbeknownst to Bob. She offers to surrender herself to Cyrus in exchange for Gabby's release to Bob. Without hesitation, the henchman accepts Case's offer. Not long after, Case and Bob arrive at Errol's location, where they encounter guards checking for weapons. Concealed in a secure bag, Bob has a hidden pistol. When Errol emerges, Bob swiftly eliminates his guards, leaving Errol terrified and defenseless. Bob then pushes him into the pool and shoots him dead. The following day, they head to the designated meeting point to deliver the money obtained from Errol. As per the agreement, Cyrus has the right to reclaim Case as his member. As Bob moves to help Case, Cyrus suddenly shoots Lena to demonstrate his cruelty in front of Bob. Cyrus then cancels his agreement with Case and strikes a new deal with Bob. Essentially, Bob will hand over half of the money taken from Errol's house immediately, while the remaining half will be handed over once Bob reunites with Gabby. Cyrus agrees to the offer and immediately reveals his location. Before departing, Cyrus mentions that his cult has connections with Arthur and John, implicating their involvement in Gabby's abduction. Despite his anger, Bob maintains composure, focusing on rescuing his daughter. Finally, Bob and Case arrive at the abduction site. Without hesitation, they hand over the remaining money to Cyrus's henchmen and approach Gabby, who has just been released. However, Cyrus breaks the agreement and signals an attack by setting off fireworks. He sends Gutter and his henchmen to hunt down Bob and Case. Knowing this, Bob swiftly hides Gabby in a sewer, where she quietly expresses her wish for her father to defeat their assailants. Bob, driven by his love, determined to protect his daughter at any cost. Shortly after, the battle ensues. Unfortunately, Gutter manages to wrap Case's head with plastic, making it difficult for her to breathe. Meanwhile, Bob faces severe beatings from his attackers. As one of Cyrus's henchmen approaches Gabby, she uses her father's pistol to shoot him. Upon hearing the gunshot, Gutter investigates its source, and despite his injuries, Bob fights back fiercely. Shortly after, Bob manages to eliminate all of Cyrus's henchmen. However, his injuries are severe, causing him to collapse and lose consciousness. The following morning, Gabby calls for help from a passing helicopter to transport Case and Bob to the hospital. A few days later, Bob's health improves, prompting him to attend the FBI hearing. There, he observes Maureen and Arthur being questioned about John's death. Alongside them, Case also arrives to confess to the police about Cyrus's crimes. Following the conclusion of the trial, Bob asks Maureen about John's fate. However, she denies any knowledge, the same with Arthur, who also denies involvement with Cyrus or his cult. This disappoints Bob greatly. Though he could have taken action against them, he chooses to punish them according to the law. Upon returning, Bob meets with Case to discuss something. Before she departs, Bob provides her with an address, revealing it to be her mother's residence. Grateful for all his assistance, Case thanks Bob sincerely. That evening, Case heads to a location that turns out to be Cyrus's hideout. She waits patiently in an old, neglected attic, hoping for Cyrus's appearance. After a week of waiting, Cyrus finally arrives. Seizing the opportunity, Case confronts him, pointing her gun at him while he's caught off guard. She commands Cyrus to sit down and, fueled by her pent-up anger, exacts her revenge, finally avenging his death with determination. The news of Cyrus's demise quickly spreads, prompting the FBI to enlist Bob to investigate the crime scene, as he's the only one aware of the killer's identity. Upon his arrival, Bob discovers a tarot card, indicating that Case has successfully sought retribution for her past. Meanwhile, Case visits her mother's address, only to find her happily living with a new family. Feeling like she's no longer needed, Case decides to leave without a word. In the movie's conclusion, Bob encounters Case once more and decides to live together, given their shared status as single individuals. Moral lesson from the story: it's important to always stay prepared for unexpected situations, even if you attend a dance session for a snake with punk music.